Hey everyone, I'm Carla Zanoni. It's nice to meet you. We weren't sure if the mics were working, so we thought we were going to have to scream. If for any reason they go out, please just let us know. So I'm so excited to have a panel of really exciting folks and a diverse group in terms of coming from different perspectives in the newsroom. It's not lost on me that we're talking about messaging apps during social media weekend. And that's really the way that I wanted to start out our conversation. First, we'll introduce everyone, but then I really want us to talk about the shift from social media to messaging apps and what exactly that means. So first, we have Daniel Alvarez, who's the Director of Product Management at Huffington Post. We have Mia Mabanta on the end, who oversees product marketing for Quartz. And we have Ryan Little, Director of Social Media and Platform Partnerships at Mashable. So, and my name's Carla Zanoni, and I'm at the Wall Street Journal. I'm the Executive Emerging Media Editor there. So I thought maybe we could just start out with everyone telling us a little bit about your role and what the first messaging app is that your organization started with, and how you've come to be interested in this area of content distribution and audience engagement.
Hi, my name is Daniel. So my organization, the product team, we have 5 product managers right now. Each of them is focused in one of the different like we're calling areas of interest for the Huffington Post. And then we have our team of designers who sort of help with that process. But the core of the messaging experience that we've had is this team that does sort of lab experimentation. And the first experience that we launched was with WhatsApp, actually way back. We was very, very manual process where we had like people add our number to it, and then we just sort of started sending them messages and interacting with it. The interest was basically just go where the users are. I mean, we were seeing that the rise of these messaging applications were exponential, and we just wanted to be sure we had some sort of presence in those mediums.
Ryan?
Hey everyone. So I lead our social team at Mashable and audience development, as well as platform partnerships. I lead a team of 6 social producers across our offices. So I have a group here in New York, a group in London, and a person in LA. And really our focus is on distribution across platforms, whether that be Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, et cetera, and then also out into specific messaging apps. So everything from Line to Viber, to soon WeChat, Snapchat, et cetera. The first messaging app that we were on, we launched back in January 2014 on Snapchat. I'm pretty confident saying we were one of the first publishers to actually hire someone as a Snapchat producer back then, who, funny enough, now works for Snapchat. She was amazing, did some really interesting things for the platform. We learned a ton through stories and, really what that audience was that has kind of helped us today as we've built out onto Snapchat Discover. And also kind of what Daniel was saying, the reason we have jumped on many of these messaging apps is because that is where there is a huge audience and a huge audience opportunity. So finding ways to be kind of a native user, a resident user, is huge for us.
Hi, I'm Mia. I've been at Quartz for about just over 3.5 years now. And in broad strokes, what I'm responsible for with regard to product marketing is enabling the success of our products in the marketplace, meaning both in the pre-development stage, is this something that people are going to respond to? Can we commercialize it? Providing insight on that, and then once the product is developed and the requirements have been outlined, helping bring it to market. In other words, the go-to-market plan for consumers, and also helping to enable sponsorships and revenue strategy. Our first messaging platform is one that we built ourselves, and the story behind it is actually that we were really seeking to or the question we had posed to ourselves wasn't so much around messaging as it was what can our native app experience be? What can a good native news app experience be for a brand that's kind of starting out doing this for the first time, and we kind of came around to messaging as part of that evolution.
So, Fred Wilson, the VC investor of a lot of social media, different sites that we've come to know and love, like Twitter and Tumblr, said that the social media phase of the internet ended in 2014. And recent reports earlier this week, I believe, showed that Snapchat daily users have surpassed Twitter. And there was a story that came out a little bit earlier this week saying that your normal average folks are quote unquote bored of social media. So I thought that I would start a panel at Social Media Weekend asking you if you think that this move toward messaging apps is really signaling the end of this golden age of social media. Do you think that the behaviors are shifting away from what we've understood on social, or is there a happy space where we can participate in all of these different platforms?
In my opinion, the rise of Snapchat content is more than a function of being a messaging app. It's a function of them finding a very innovative way of providing a rich, interactive UX that people can just sort of consume content differently. And I think if we can explore and extrapolate those experiences in other places, it's also more opportunities can arise. So I don't think that indicates the death of social media. It indicates a rise of people getting used to more richer experiences than then we can just try to tap into and just put in many different places.
And do you think there are different ways of communicating with your audience, and one happens to be on messaging app platforms and one happens to be social, and if so, what are those differences?
Sure, I think there's a variety of ways that we communicate with our audience depending on the platform. So, the number of apps that any normal person is using is a pretty small amount. So if you see a rise of Snapchat, there has to be a certain space where potentially other apps kind of fall out or other platforms fall out. But for us as a publisher and again, as just a user of these platforms, we have to find unique and accessible ways to be a part of those platforms. So on Snapchat, for example, if we're doing a story, we're going to change that for that specific audience because the audience there is younger. They're more interested, especially with us. They're more interested in some of the red carpet or real-time events that we're doing, as opposed to at times maybe like a more serious real-time story. For example, we were at the Met Gala last year, and this was a really interesting thing. We had snaps of Kanye and Kardashian and Jay-Z and Beyonce, but the most screenshotted photo or the most screenshotted snap was this group photo of these Vine stars who probably no one in this room would recognize. And we just had this realization at that point. It's like, this is the audience that we're working with, and we have to continue to think about that as we create for Discover. But that's going to be different from how we use Line because we're mixing in push notifications, and we can't over push there. Where on Facebook we may be posting 40 to 45 times a day. So it's a little bit. It's certainly different. The strategy's different. The users are going to be different. The behaviors are different.
Well, can I ask just one question before we move on? I think for us at the Journal, we definitely spent a lot of time thinking about how we retain our voice. So when you just said we're thinking about changing, how we speak to our readers on these different platforms, how do you make sure that you retain that brand identity and that journalistic voice no matter where you go?
Sure. We still are going to cover a story or cover an event. And so that's number one. So for example, Apple has a huge event on Monday, WWDC. We're going to cover that in a certain way for a very core tech audience on Twitter. And we're going to give real-time updates and a lot of granular details of, the products or the operating systems, et cetera, that they're going to be rolling out. But on Snapchat, it's going to be different because it's going to be less of that in your face, very granular information and more about, what is Tim Cook doing on stage? What are some of the different types of presentations, and more of like the visual elements as opposed to just like the specific details. So it really just comes down to the specific audience. And again, if we didn't see specific return in the way that we approach each platform, we would be one voice across. But we can't do that because the audiences are different.
Mia, do you find it different for your approach, thinking about chatbots? And
Well, I think an important distinction to make with regard to chatbots and messaging and content products as opposed to other types of products is that the use case isn't as clear oftentimes with content products. So like for more transactional products like e-commerce, for instance, right? It's great to be able to order something through a chat interface or a bot interface, some sort of automated. It's great if it has a personality, but it doesn't have to, frankly, for me to prefer it. Like I love getting receipts over Facebook Messenger for online retailers who do that. That's so easy for me. With content, though, the automation piece of it isn't as valuable as that straight up transaction. There's a certain soul and personality that needs to be retained there. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And in fact, I only have this one photo of our final app, but if I were to show earlier versions, the version just prior to this one was super robotic, almost soulless, because it was an automated feed of similar content, but without the sort of human emotional flourishes. So I think that's like when you talk about the sort of rise of messaging and chat overtaking social media, I think that's more clear for certain categories of products than others.
what are your goals for being on messaging apps? I get this question all the time, not only for apps, but social media as well. Why would you be on a platform if it's not driving traffic back to your site or those kinds of things? What is your real purpose for being there, and how do you measure success?
Of course, we always have a goal associated with it, trying to get X many users to join our chat, to join our channel. But really what we're looking to learn is insights and learnings from these users and really understand what type of content resonates better with them in that medium. So when we are ready to really double down on this as a platform for distribution, then we will already know exactly how is the best way to communicate and to create that empathy with users. So that's what our main goal is. Well, most of this experience is just learnings and insights.
Mia, is it the same for you?
That's partly it. For us, it was about, I guess, two things. One is along those lines, there hasn't been a great native news product for mobile just yet, right? At that time, or a couple of years ago, so many apps, with obviously there are exceptions, but so many news apps were copies of their websites. And so you saw numbers from like Flurry Analytics showing that 2% of time on our phones is spent within news apps, and all that other time is spent elsewhere. So for us, it was the question of how can we create an experience for news that's really native to these devices. So that was one. And then second was to diversify our revenue. That was a really important component of it. How are we going to make this into a viable business? And I'll just say that similar to how we approach our email newsletter, which links out to 25 different sources that are not our website, it's sort of a similar approach with this messaging platform, where if you as a user of this app don't ever click out to a story on QZ.com, it's fine. And we've been able to luckily kind of commercialize the app experience itself.
I mean, the word that keeps coming up is mobile, and I'm wondering how much of the work that you're doing on messaging apps, how does that feed back into your strategy on Mashable.com or on these different distribution platforms?
Sure. I mean, Mashable in general is mobile first. I mean, the heavy majority of our audience comes from mobile, so everything we're doing is created for that experience. If you, for example, if you even look at our Snapchat Discover experience, we've cut back quite a bit over the recent months on the amount of text that we have on our long form view. because again, for mobile, we want to keep it as visual of an experience while adding some of that context. But reading a really long form piece, especially through Discover, may not be the best experience, especially again when we're talking about an incredibly young audience who is not really spending a ton of time on each Discover edition. So, we take that experience that we've created on Mashable.com, and we're trying to carry that across all of these platforms as well. So you'll see this online as well. We try to keep it very visual. We'll have a lot of short form video, and actually a lot of that video that we share there was created for Snapchat first, and we're using a lot of those assets that essentially would disappear after 24 hours, and it has a new place to kind of continue to live on, and it's a vertical video experience that looks beautiful on the platform. So we're able to take many of these assets and make them work elsewhere as well.
I'm glad you just brought up resources. When you're talking about all of that, I'm thinking humans that have to create all of this. So I made just a quick list of some messaging apps, and I'm sure I'm not including all of them: WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Viber, Kik, Hike, Line, WeChat, Telegram, Kakao Talk, Snapchat. How do you create content for all of those? I'm hearing you're leveraging some of the work that you're doing on one platform, bringing it elsewhere. How are you guys really doing that in-house and making sure you're feeding all of these accounts?
So for us, at the time, we don't have a specifically dedicated team to this. So it's a team that does many things, and then they assign part of their time to sort of sparking conversation in these messaging chats. We traditionally just use other content that lives somewhere else in our site. We just try to use the one that we've known that resonates better with the audience. And then there's specifically the one we have on Viber. There's like a lot of back and forth conversation that our editors have about certain topic, which sort of gives the users like a behind the scenes take on what the editorial newsroom is thinking about a specific story, and trying to bring them a little bit closer to the editor in that way.
And is that, so you don't have a team working on messaging apps, but you have a social media team.
Correct.
Is this all housed in social media, or is it distributed
It's a bit
throughout?
distributed because like we have, our channels are very narrow focused. We have one HuffPost Entertainment, HuffPost Politics, so we make sure we have the team that is represented for that particular vertical, and then with the help of these social media experts that will make sure that the messaging is correct and make sure that it's ready to go in that medium.
Ryan, do you think that the work that you've done with social video for, say, Facebook or Twitter, how did you leverage those lessons that you learned creating that and bringing it to apps? Is that?
Yeah, I think there's, and this is a really good question. We shoot a lot of our Snapchat video so that we can also, again, repurpose it in other places. And we have seen not a full crossover, but there are times where, we have, a series that we're using for Snapchat that works incredibly well for Facebook video and for Twitter video and vice versa. That's not every single series, but we are perfectly fine if we're creating one series and it lives in one place. But when we are able to take some of those efforts and we can carry that over and create that for another platform, that's kind of the biggest win for us. I think in some ways, like we've learned on Facebook, obviously, like you're more than 85% of users are watching video without sound. So it's very audio agnostic, and we have to take a lot of those assumptions at times on Snapchat as well, on Twitter, etc. So we are trying to create assets that can be very explanatory, have some text that's overlaid on certain pieces, so that it's not obtrusive, but a user, if they're watching it on silent, they can still get kind of that full view of kind of what's happening. So, we're trying to carry some of those things over. I don't think every time is a success, but it's always a learning experience.
Mia, when you were building the bot, were you was the team that was working on that completely separate from your social media editors, or was it a shared responsibility across the board?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we had a core team of 5 people, and that was Zach Seward, who heads product and is also our executive editor. You know Zach. Daniel Lee, who designed it. Sam Williams, who is our lead developer on it. Adam Pasick, who's our editorial lead, and then me representing sort of the marketplace viability of it. Under Adam Pasick, who now runs the editorial operation, there are 6 journalists who are writing for the app around the clock. So it's all human-generated content, actually. A number of them are based in New York, and then we have some people in London, Berlin, and a couple of other places as well. So yeah, it's a pretty. They do some other stuff, those journalists, but they're right now very, very focused on getting that just right. You know, because the whole reason we wanted to start with our own owned and operated app, and a lot of people have asked us this. You know, why didn't you go for scale with WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger right away? It's a great question. It's because we had full control over an environment that we built ourselves, and for us, it was so important to be able to get that voice right. So that's kind of the focus right now. Yeah.
So I love that you said a phrase, marketplace viability, something that in most newsrooms you'd see journalists kind of, you know, staring a little bit afraid. It's a term that I know for myself as a journalist was not something that I ever really thought about. We just kind of dove into different projects. So when you're both assessing whether or not there is a viability, how are you measuring success? Are you getting the kinds of analytics that you need? I'm guessing you are because you guys built it. But how do you make sure that you're actually succeeding as you're building all of these products?
It's tough, you know. So yeah, we do measure pretty much everything that goes on in there because we built it ourselves. So we have that advantage, which is great from a commercial standpoint. So marketplace viability on the commercial side, we measure that in terms of how much revenue we're generating, and we've sold out those spaces through nearly the end of the year. So there's a lot of interest there. You know, just it's a new platform. We're getting great engagement on those sponsorships so far from users. So that's been great. I think for us it'll be interesting to kind of see, you know, how we handle growth going forward, right? Like, we started it with an audience of 0. We're not piggybacking on the scale of some other big messaging platforms. So for us it'll be how can we continue to sustain that? Yeah.
Ryan, what are you guys looking
Sure.
at? And are you getting the data you need?
No, it's a good question. No. Messaging apps are, I mean, if you're on any messaging app, usually to join, you just need an email address. So you're not getting the demo data from most of these platforms that you wish you could. So that part's difficult. There obviously are some workarounds. Not all are perfect. I know we talked about this before, but biggest workaround that we have on the Line platform is we Bitly everything. So we can at least have an idea of you know, where our audiences reside or when they click through. So that's one part which helps a little bit in terms of like when we're doing push messaging or, you know, timing of certain stories or just performance overall. Line, we get a ton of engagement, which is, you know, a pretty amazing thing. And we've grown very quickly there. You know, we started basically at the beginning of the year and have more than 400,000 followers. And it's continuing to grow. And this is an audience that is really interacting with our content. You know, I think long term, we have a long way to go on, you know, online, on Viber. So right now, they're certainly just community plays to really continue to build these audiences. And, you know, we're kind of forecasting at the return that we're seeing now with push messaging, some of the traffic that we're seeing, you know, as we get 4, 5, 6 times larger in terms of our followings, like these numbers are actually substantial. And then it actually becomes a much bigger play for us on a regular basis in terms of return. But all of these are going to be different. Like Viber is a completely different ecosystem than Line or Snapchat because it's a public chat. It's basically just a chat room that's public. So, you know, there aren't the same types of you know, traffic plays there, but it's right now it's a brand play, and we'll continue to see how, you know, that platform and others evolve.
Daniel, does your team look at data? Is this a shared responsibility? How are you tracking?
Yeah, we definitely do a lot of data analysis of whatever comes from it. It's not ideal. The platforms that we're on don't really provide an easy way to export the data and making sure that we can sort of analyze with the rest of our platform to make sure we can sort of correlate how that corresponds to how a specific article might be performing in a different place. But we do get some interesting learnings that we've sort of started applying and making sure that when we see something that really captures the attention of a particular user, then we make sure we try it again to see if it's a fluke of that piece of content or if it's a trend that we can then start applying in a more continuous way.
I was wondering, I'm just mindful of time, and I want to make sure that we have enough time for Q&As. But I'm particularly fascinated with the idea of visual language, so emojis or stickers or these different ways of communicating on these messaging apps, and wondered if you guys had any thoughts about them. I know you've really done a lot of work online with stickers. What have you learned there?
Yeah, so we actually launched our first, and this is, you guys will probably love this, but we launched our first sticker pack on the Viber platform. And for those of you who aren't maybe familiar with sticker packs or the sticker market, these are somewhat like emoji here, but it's essentially a way of communicating that is incredibly popular on many of these messaging apps like WeChat and Line and Viber. Users will purchase these packs and use them in their private chats and conversations with friends. I never thought when I graduated college that I'd be part of a sticker strategy.
It's revenue diversification.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, we really learned a lot through kind of the back and forth that we had with the Viber team, and how to create these, and how we, you know, make them fun and playful so that they'll actually get downloaded, while also trying to keep them, you know, somewhat on brand. So, and also in ways that like users are going to want to use them to communicate. The amazing thing with many of these packs, like on Viber and online, they're called buddy packs. So if users download them, they're free, and then they follow your account. So it's one of the coolest. It would be like paid marketing on Facebook if you're trying to acquire fans. Here, you're giving them stickers and they follow your account. So on Viber, we actually have had in about 2 months more than 700,000 downloads, and so our numbers just blew up. And so Line also has this, and we're actually in the process of creating another pack. It's not as much text heavy. It's going to be different than this, but it's, you know, we're hoping to have those kinds of results, which would, you know, drive serious return for us.
Anybody else want to weigh in on the sticker economy?
So we're not involved in the sticker economy just yet, but when Zach Seward sort of introduced his fascination with emoji into the app, you know, our publisher on the business side's first reaction was, you know, not as receptive as you might hope for. But it really turned out to be, emoji and GIFs also really turned out to be such a game changer for the personality of the app. I think the GIFs in particular, those 7 journalists are really developing a knack for finding them at the right time in the right places. And I would say the number one feature request that we get from users actually is the ability to share those GIFs. And, you know, right, then kind of talking about how messaging interacts with social, it's kind of interesting that we hadn't really thought too much about that. And now people are actually asking for that social element to be able to share that experience, despite the fact that it's in its own sort of walled garden.
I'm curious, maybe this could be the closing question. I know that I'm mindful that our newsrooms are pretty global and large, right? Even if they're startup-ish, right? Certainly not the Journal, but I'm wondering how you go about convincing business side executives or your editor-in-chief to take a risk in these different kinds of platforms where it's not easy to track success? It's a brand new language in many regards. What kind of advice would you give folks here for how they can do that?
For us, we've been lucky that people are really eager to experiment. So, and since it doesn't really require a lot of heavy lift on our end, we're just been experimenting wherever we can. And for the global sense of it, we've had tons of interest for our UK edition. We have someone that is here on our editorial in the US, but he speaks Chinese, so he's been populating our WeChat channel in Chinese, with content in Chinese. So we've been sort of playing around with all that, and they've been so far very receptive for us experimenting. I guess that's until we start tying up a lot of resources, and then will be a different story.
Yeah, no, I think also that Daniel is right in that the first thing you have to sell is it's not always a heavy lift. So, Viber has been something that we've, shared across the newsroom. So a number of our sections, like our tech editorial team, our business editorial team, entertainment, may take a day. And that commitment is usually like 15 or 20 minutes at most, and it's kind of like a chat room. So there isn't a heavy lift, and there's ways that our teams can just kind of talk about stories, and at times that can drive conversations or story ideas, which is great. Line is handled by a couple people on my team, and again, it's not the heaviest of lifts because we have been using it enough that we kind of know the types of stories that we're moving forward with on a regular basis, and we can kind of set up a calendar at the beginning of the week and really push some of that stuff out and update throughout the week. I guess I would say in terms of trying to sell it is by looking at some of the past successes of some of the other platforms. I mean, when we jumped on in the early days, we jumped on Facebook or Twitter or Pinterest, there wasn't this guarantee that they were going to become these huge mega platforms. Pinterest especially. I mean, we jumped on that, and there wasn't this guarantee that we were going to see a ton of traffic return. And now that has grown to be our number 3 social referral. And so being able to use some of those successes from other platforms has been an easy way for us to sell it.
Yeah, so I'll say 2 things in response to that. So first, with regard to the business side, it's actually great that a lot of them have come to Quartz because they want to do something that does feel really different and experimental. I had never worked in media before this job myself, and I was drawn to this opportunity to really build something new. So there's that appetite for it. But on the other side, when it comes to just getting the entire organization kind of moving in the same general direction, especially for us, we've grown from, I don't even know the numbers, we're nearly 200 people now, and we were probably 60 last year. Something we did was we had one all-hands meeting where we kind of talked about what our 5 organizational priorities were for 2016, and then revisit those, on a regular basis. And it's actually been hugely helpful, just as a sort of guiding light for people. And then, in terms of physical everyday signals in the newsroom, whereas we might have only had our chart beat number, right, our site visits number up on a screen for everybody to see, as we've diversified onto all these different platforms, we've introduced those visual cues as well, just to signify that, hey, site traffic isn't everything. We're looking at these other platforms as well.
I'm curious, how do you do that? Or do you have a dashboard that you
We
created?
have a guy named Sam Williams who just is like an Internet of Things guy. We have the weather bulb that changes color depending what's going on outside. So yeah,
That's awesome.
Have him on your next panel.
All right, good. I will. So I think we have about 10 minutes. I wanted to take questions. I don't know. Does anybody have a question? Do you want to speak loudly and stand up, please?
I can
Please.
start. Yeah, we are publishing anywhere from like 2 to 3 times a day on the timeline. And then it's usually a mix. So we usually publish push notifications probably about 3 to 5 times a week. We used to be doing daily, and we just started seeing a little bit of drop off, so we've kind of cut back. And then it's usually in terms of push notifications, a mix of template like visual pushes. It's called like the rich messaging, and some of the custom short form video. In terms of traffic, I mean, right now it's still pretty small. So it's not something that's really pushing the needle as of yet. But again, as we've kind of forecasted this out about 3 to 5 times larger, it is going to be a much more substantial play for us.
For us, since our channels are very focused on a vertical, we don't do as many pushes continuously. So like for Line, for example, it's HuffPost lifestyle. So we just push a few stories every now and then. Like you said, it's not really a traffic that's going to move the needle, but we have found that Line audiences, at least for us, are much more engaged than Viber in terms of actually going back to our site and then starting to consume our content.
So I can answer what we're doing. We probably push a little bit more often than Mashable. And we have, in Hong Kong, we have a dedicated editor who works on the platform. And we do actually see a fairly significant amount of traffic coming back, particularly throughout Asia, which is a market that we've targeted, and we're starting to see evidence of people in the United States using it, which I think is really fascinating. And in terms of the data that we would like, we're pushing Line to really share with us some demographics data, because we can guess, but we're not 100% sure. So I would say if Asia is a market that you're interested in, it's definitely something you should be looking at, but I wouldn't ignore it because you're not necessarily just looking to grow Asia. I have great.
For somebody who's have used Facebook Messenger but no other of these apps, where would you start? Would you start with Snapchat, or which one would you look at? Especially, I'm a professor, so I want to know what my students are looking at. So I'm thinking Snapchat's probably the right one for that.
Sure. Yeah, I think ultimately it does come down to the audience goals. So Line, we launched on Line when we opened an office in Singapore, and it became that audience became a much more important focus for us. Viber again has been kind of across the board, but I mean for us, Snapchat is a huge investment. So beyond Discover, we also do quite a bit through Snapchat Stories, and so it's a huge opportunity and resource. I mean, 150 million daily active users, very young users. That's a great place to start. A great place to start.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for being here.